Listen here. I don't appreciate you using all these big words trying to teach me German when I don't even understand what you're saying in English. How am I supposed to learn a foreign language whenever you're talking English words I don't even understand? Transitive and intransitive verbs? Man, what you talking about? You may have been trying to learn German on your own and you've come across the words transitive and intransitive. These words have almost no meaning whatsoever to the average person. Honestly, I wouldn't have known what they were if it weren't for the fact that I'm teaching a foreign language for a living. So let me explain. Obviously, one of these is the opposite of the other one, which is why there's the prefix in at the beginning of one of them. Since both of them are usually followed by the word verbs, it's safe to say that it describes a verb in some way. The easy explanation is that a transitive verb is one that takes a direct object, while an intransitive verb is one that doesn't. But again, that's not very helpful unless you know what a direct object is. In any given sentence, the one who is doing something in the sentence is the subject. The person or thing that the subject is acting upon is the direct object. Basically, the subject is the doer of the sentence, and the direct object is the one being verbed. Well, that's great and all, but what does that mean in the real world, man? Let's start with transitive verbs because they're a little bit easier to understand. I have a dog. I am the one that is doing something in this sentence, and therefore I am the subject of the sentence. I am the one that has something. The something that I have is the dog. The dog is the thing being verbed in this sentence. That makes it the direct object. This means that the verb to have is a transitive verb, as it takes a direct object. Or to put it more simply, one thing verbs another thing. This works pretty much with any action verb: kicking, throwing, hitting, buying, giving, taking, and so on. Intransitive verbs are the ones that don't take a direct object. These verbs are sometimes called linking verbs. The most common of these verbs is to be, which includes the forms am, is, are, was, were, and so on. This is still a bit confusing to some people though. I am a man. I am the one that's doing something in this sentence, which makes me the subject of the sentence, as we showed in the previous example. Obviously, a man is the thing that I am verbing, in this case the thing that I am being, which would mean that a man is a direct object in that sentence. But that isn't the case here. If you can put an equal sign where the verb is, and the sentence still means about the same thing as it did before, you're working with an intransitive verb. I equal a man. It still makes sense, even if you sound like a caveman. There are, of course, a few more confusing verbs. For instance, motion verbs, in other words, verbs that show that you're moving from one place to another, are generally considered to be intransitive verbs, because it wouldn't make sense to go something. Ignore the fact that you can go fishing, that's a different example and will require a different video. I am going home. Going is your verb, I am the subject, and home is not being acted upon by the subject. It's more of a direction in which you are going. It would be no different if I said I am going east. The confusing part comes up when you have a verb like to drive. I am driving home has the same effect as the person saying I am going home. Home is not being verbed, but is describing the direction in which I am traveling. I am driving my car home is a bit different. In that sentence, my car is the direct object. I am verbing the car. That means that to drive is used as a transitive verb in that sentence. To make a long story short, certain verbs can be used as transitive or intransitive verbs. While this can be a bit confusing, it helps to think of the idea, is something being verbed here? If the answer is yes, you have a transitive verb. If the answer is no, you have an intransitive verb. Another point of confusion is that verbs that people often think are transitive verbs are not always transitive verbs in English. Verbs like to read. While it can be used as a transitive verb, I am reading a book, it can also be used as an intransitive verb, I am reading. The absence of a direct object tells us that it is now intransitive. Now for the real question, why is this video on a German channel when I haven't even mentioned the German language in this entire video? English is a Germanic language, which means that most of the ideas translate really well into German, but sometimes it's difficult to wrap your brain around the German concept if you don't understand your own language first. So now that you understand the English, let's dive into the German. The first time that transitive versus intransitive becomes necessary for a German learner to know is when they encounter the accusative case. This is the case for direct objects. This only really affects things when the direct object is a masculine noun or a pronoun. But let's just take a look at a few examples in English and compare it to the German. I have a dog. Ich habe einen Hund. I am a man. Ich bin ein Mann. You'll notice that we changed to einen instead of ein for the first sentence because Hund is being verbed and is a masculine noun. In the second sentence, the intransitive verb sein can't take a direct object, which means that the man remains in the nominative case, and therefore we say ein Mann. The German case system helps to make things clearer so that we understand what is a direct object and what is not. Just remember that this isn't always helpful. If we use a feminine noun, the only way to tell which one's the subject and which thing is the object is the word order. Ich habe eine Katze. I have a cat. Ich bin eine Frau. I am a woman. Let's look at the confusing examples that I gave in English. When you're looking at a motion verb, you generally don't use a direct object, which means that they are intransitive verbs. But, as can be done in English, you can also drive vehicles, which means that it can be a transitive verb. Ich fahre nach Hause. I am driving home. Ich fahre mein Auto nach Hause. I am driving my car home. Obviously, the other versions work pretty well in German as well. Ich lese. I am reading. Ich lese einen Krimi. I am reading a detective story. The second time that most German learners will encounter the transitive versus intransitive argument is when they get to the present perfect tense, also known as das Perfekt. Then you'll learn that intransitive verbs use a form of sein, while transitive verbs use a form of haben. This is usually where it gets a bit more confusing. Most of the time, this logic works pretty well. Ich bin nach Hause gefahren. I drove home. Ich habe mein Auto nach Hause gefahren. I drove my car home. Ich habe einen Hund gehabt. I had a dog. Ich habe einen Krimi gelesen. I read a detective story. Ich bin ein Mann gewesen. I was a man. The issue comes up whenever you're using a verb that is usually transitive but doesn't have an object in the sentence. In those instances, the German language defaults to what happens most of the time. Ich habe gelesen. I read. Ich bin gefahren. I drove. Ich bin gereist. I have traveled. Ich habe gegessen. I ate. It's because of this that most German teachers explain this topic as motion verbs versus non-motion verbs. The issue comes up when you get to verbs like bleiben, which is the very definition of a non-motion verb as it means to remain or stay. But it can't take a direct object, so it has to be an intransitive verb. In that case, you use a form of sein in the present perfect tense in German. This type of logic also helps to clear up the either-or nature of fahren. Ich bin zu Hause geblieben. I stayed at home. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this video was much more detailed than any of you were really hoping for. But if you still have any questions about this topic, you can leave them down in the comments below. I will answer any questions that you have about transitive and intransitive verbs in German or in English. Das ist alles für heute. Danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss!